Week 6 of the fantasy football season, and here's the top 36 running backs I'm ranking here. For this week, the first guy is Saquon Barkley of the New York Giants. So Saquon Barkley, what a season it's been for him, and I think he's having a great year as well because he knows that contract's up, and he wants to cash in for big money. So this season, he's been the best fantasy player so far at the running back position. This week, not the greatest of matchups versus Baltimore, but Saquon Barkley, he's matchup proof, and each and every week it seems like he rips off a 40, 50-yard run and finds the end zone at least once or twice. The only thing in last week's ball game versus the Packers, he banged that shoulder up, but came back in the game and won it pretty much for the Giants. So this week here, and each and every week, he's a top 2, top 3 running back. But this week I got him in one, number 2, Christian McCaffrey of the Carolina Panthers. So CMC, for the most part, he's pretty much the whole offense over there in Carolina. I know Baker Mayfield is out, but to be honest, PJ Walker can't do any worse than Baker Mayfield. So right now, Christian McCaffrey is still going to get his catches. He's still going to get his touches. Matt Rule is gone as the head coach, and we'll see if maybe they find even more space for him. I know it's not the greatest of matchups at the Los Angeles Rams, but just like Barkley, these top guys are matchup proof. And I got him at 2. Number 3, Austin Eckler of the Los Angeles Chargers. Eckler, the last 2 weeks here, has been putting up monster fantasy games here, especially last week, rushing over 170 yards in that ball game and 2 total touchdowns. Eckler right now, he's hitting his stride after getting off to a slow start the first 2-3 weeks of the season here. In Denver, we know they're a pretty good team, but last week I thought Phillip Lindsay and Deion Jackson ran pretty decent. So just imagine what Eckler could do in this ball game versus Denver on Monday Night Football in the Chargers home game. And I got him at 3. Number 4, Nick Chubb of the Cleveland Browns. So the Browns here, their offense, believe it or not, they put up points this season here. This is a tough matchup, though, no doubt about it, versus the New England Patriots here in Week 4. But Nick Chubb, the first 5 games of the season, has gone over 100 yards from scrimmage, and it wouldn't be surprising once again if he does it this week. And he's a lock here in the top 5. I got him at 4. Number 5, Leonard Fournette of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Leonard Fournette, all of a sudden now, he's starting to get things going and catching a lot of passes out of the backfield. Here's Fournette, especially the last 2 weeks. Last week's ball game versus the Falcons, 10 catches, 83 yards, and he found the end zone. And another great matchup here at the Pittsburgh Steelers. This Steeler defense, they've been getting torched over the last few weeks here. Fournette, I think we're going to see a lot of him out of the backfield catching the football. And this week I like him at 5. Number 6, Dalvin Cook of the Minnesota Vikings. A lot of people, they were getting worried about Dalvin Cook when he was going to start producing and putting up fantasy numbers. But right here in last week's ball game where the Vikings just pulled that one out versus the Chicago Bears, he found the end zone twice with 20-plus fantasy points as Cook. And this week here, I think he could grind it out at this Miami Dolphin defense that has been on the field a lot lately now since Tua went down with injury, like they were last week where Breece Hall and Michael Carter both had good ball games. So right here, I think Cook once again could reach that 20-point plateau, and I got him at number 6. Number 7, Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints. And Kamara finally broke out with a monster ball game, and maybe he's finally healthy here, is Alvin Kamara, because we didn't see much from him to begin the season. And he also obviously missed 2 ball games with the rib injury in the beginning of the season. Here's Kamara, but he looked great last week. And I know a great matchup versus Seattle that gives up the 4th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. But Kamara, last week, he went out there and he put in the game, going over 100 yards with 91 yards receiving as well. So this week here, he's up there in the rankings at 7. Number 8, Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. So Taylor, we know he missed Week 5's ball game, but I think that was a cautious holdout for this Colts team, and they still went on and beat the Broncos in Week 5. So right here, I think he should be back. Jacksonville Jaguars, their defense has been hit or miss now over the last few games here. Miles Sanders go off for a stem a couple weeks ago, and Damian Pierce, he looked good last week. So right now, Jonathan Taylor, if he does play in this game, which I expect him to, I got him in number 8. Number 9, Aaron Jones of the Green Bay Packers. So Aaron Jones, he's been getting a good workload, and he's definitely passed A.J. Dillon further than last season in touches in the backfield. A.J. Dillon's been a non-factor for the last 3 or 4 weeks here for fantasy football. So right now, Aaron Jones, we know he's a good running back. 10 points or more in the last 4 ball games for him in PPR leagues. And this Jet defense, they still have trouble with the run. Last week, we saw Mostert go over 100 yards. And in this one, it definitely could happen with Aaron Jones going over 100. And I got him in number 9. Number 10, Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals. So Joe Mixon, it hasn't been that great of a year here for Mixon, but he's still putting up decent numbers. Right now, he's a low-end number 1, high-end number 2 running back for fantasy owners. So the last couple weeks here for Mixon, week 4 versus the Dolphins, 61 yards rushing, a touchdown, 4 catches, 13 yards. And week 5 of Baltimore, 14 carries, 78 yards with 3 catches for 10 yards. So right here, week 6, a tough matchup on paper versus the Saints that give up the 6th least amount of fantasy points to running backs on the season. But last week we saw Kenneth Walker break a big one. Rashad Penny was running good before he broke his fibula in that ball game. And with his workload and with a lot of weak running backs this season, I got Joe Mixon in number 10, number 11, Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. So Stevenson, he's been a truck in the ball games where he got a lot of workload last season. And then last week, what a ball game for him, 161 yards rushing. And now the news coming out, Damian Harris is going to be out for multiple weeks with a hamstring injury. So right now, with Stevenson, the number 1 running back, each and every week, he's going to be a running back, 10 to 15 in the rankings here. He's a big back. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. And I think it's time the Patriots pitch the torch anyway for Stevenson to be that every down guy here, because I think he's more talented than Damian Harris. And to be honest, Harris, he's banged up on and off over the last couple seasons. So Stevenson, I got at 11. Number 12, Breece Hall of the New York Jets. So Breece Hall, I wasn't that hyped on him coming into the season, but he's proved me wrong here. I thought this Jet O-line wouldn't block well for him, but the last 3 ball games, 15 or more fantasy points in PPR leagues. And last week versus Miami, had the best game of his career in the pros, 97 rushing yards on 18 carries with a touchdown and 2 catches for 100 yards, which is obviously a little far-fetched. He had a reception over 70 yards where he got stopped at the 1-yard line in the game. But right here, decent matchup at the Packers. We saw Saquon Barkley have a good ball game with them. And Breece Hall's a low-end, high number 2 running back. This week, I got him at 12-13, Jeff Wilson Jr. of the San Francisco 49ers. So I think the Niners, honestly, they found their every down back. Well, obviously, a guy who's going to get majority of the carries here in Jeff Wilson Jr. So ever since Elijah Mitchell went out in Week 1's ball game, Jeff Wilson's filled in, and he's playing good football with 12 or more fantasy points in 4 games in a row. And last week, he cracked 100 yards with 120 yards rushing and a touchdown. So Week 6 here, a great matchup with the Atlanta Falcons that just got destroyed by Leonard Fournette, and even Rashad White had a decent ball game in Week 5. So right here, Jeff Wilson Jr., he's another guy that's borderline number 1 running back this week for your team, and a high-end number 2, and I got him at 13-14, David Montgomery of the Chicago Bears. So Montgomery, a good matchup versus the Commanders this week here. And a lot of people thought Herbert and him would split, but Herbert last week only 3 or 4 touches in that ball game, and Montgomery came back and played a good ball game with 18.20 fantasy points, 20 rush yards, a touchdown, and he did his damage in the receiving game, 4 catches, 62 yards. So this week here, I got him at 14, number 15, James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals. So James Conner, we don't know if he's going to play. He got banged up with a rib injury, is James Conner. So he left that ball game early for the Arizona Cardinals in the Week 5 defeat to the Philadelphia Eagles. But this week here, if he does play, he's got a good matchup at the Seattle Seahawks that can't stop the run at all. We saw New Orleans shred them on the ground last week here. And I think, once again, this week, if James Conner or Eno Benjamin, whoever it is, could finish in the top 15, top 20 at running back. But if Conner plays, I got him at 15. But if Benjamin's the starter and gets the workload, he'll be in that 15 to 20 range as well. Number 16, Kenneth Walker of the Seattle Seahawks. So Kenneth Walker last week bursted onto the scene after Penny went out with the leg injury. And obviously Penny's out for the season now. So Walker, he's going to be the bell cow. He's going to get a majority of the touches. I think DJ Dallas could play a little bit of a factor, and Travis Homer on some passing downs. But right here, Kenneth Walker, 88 yards and a touchdown last week with a bursted 69-yard touchdown. And he's got a decent matchup versus the Arizona Cardinals. This Cardinal defense, I don't think is that good. And Kenneth Walker's a guy that he showed some flashes already where I think he's a solid number 2 running back on fantasy teams this week. Number 17, Miles Sanders of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Miles Sanders, it's been one great week and one bad week. And that's exactly what it's been. A couple weeks ago, a monster game versus Jacksonville with over 25 fantasy points in PPR leagues in that rainy ball game in Week 4. And then Week 5, He just didn't do much in Arizona, which I thought he would have a good game over there. But Jalen Hurts stole a goal line stopper, and he only finished the ball game with 8.40 fantasy points. But right here, Week 6 versus Dallas, not a great matchup as well. The fourth least amount of fantasy points to running backs this season. But Sanders, as a number 2 running back with the volume he's getting, we're not seeing Kenneth Gainwell or Boston Scott really eating into his workload. This week here versus Dallas, I think he's a decent guy at number 17. Number 18, Melvin Gordon of the Denver Broncos. So Melvin Gordon, he didn't look that great, I thought, in that ball game, but he still put up fantasy numbers in that slop fest on Thursday Night Football versus the Colts in Week 5, where he finished the ball game with 15 carries, 54 yards, and he had 3 grabs for 49 yards. So this week here, a great matchup at his former team, the Chargers, that give up the most fantasy points to running backs on the season. So, Gordon's going to want to stick it to his former team here. He's getting a majority of the workload, even though Mike Boone looked pretty good to me as well. And this week here is a number 2 running back. I would have confidence starting him, and I got him at number 18. Number 19, Ezekiel Elliott of the Dallas Cowboys. So Elliott here, tough matchup at Philly, no doubt about it. We know Elliott, he hasn't been running that great this season, but as a number 2 running back, I think he's serviceable. And throughout his career, it feels like he's found the end zone pretty much every game versus Philadelphia defense. So right here this week, I think he has a bounce-back ball game after not doing much versus the Rams in Week 5, where Tony Pollard outdid him, where he ran for a 50-plus yard touchdown in that one and finished with 14 fantasy points. So right here, Ezekiel Elliott, I think, has a decent game, and I got him in 19. Number 20, Devin Singletary of the Buffalo Bills. So Singletary, last week, it was a down game for him after coming off of 2 big ball games in Week 3 and Week 4. But right here, I think they're going to use him a lot on screens and dump-offs out of the backfield here is this Buffalo Bill team. Even though this offense last week exploded for 38 points. Gabe Davis looked like he was back in the mix of things, catching a 98 and a 62-yard touchdown. And they just didn't run the ball that much. And then by the time they started running, the game was out of hand, and James Cook was in the ball game, and he ran for like a 25, 30-yard touchdown in that one in garbage time. But this week here, a good matchup with the Chiefs that give up the 3rd most points to running backs. And Singletary as a low-end number 2 flex option this week is a decent play, and I got him at 20. Number 21, Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Harris, I almost had him lower on this list here. This guy pretty much one of the biggest busts, if not the biggest bust, this season in fantasy football, going in the first round and coming up short each and every week. I thought Week 3 was turning the corner, where he had a 13-point fantasy day with 56 yards rushing and a touchdown at Cleveland. But the last 2 weeks here, the Jets shut him down. 18 carries, 74 yards. In Week 5 at Buffalo, 3 catches, 16 yards, and 11 carries, 20 yards. And that's not going to get the job done. And this week versus Tampa, he's a guy I don't expect much out of him. Tampa gives up the 2nd least amount of fantasy points to running backs on the season. So Harris, I think we could see more of the same from him, where he's just not doing anything, and he's a player that's going to have a rough time. So at 21, I got him. But if you got better options, he's a guy that I would sit on my bench this week. Number 22, Kareem Hunt of the Cleveland Browns. So Kareem Hunt, he hasn't been the same this season like he was last. I think Nick Chubb's been getting the ball more than he has. And Kareem Hunt, he just hasn't put up numbers. But last week was a good bounce-back game for him versus a weak Charger run defense. 11 carries, 47 yards, a touchdown, 3 catches, 10 yards. So this week here, tough matchup, no doubt about it, in Week 6 versus New England. That gives up the 5th least amount of fantasy points to running backs on the season. But the thing is here with Kareem Hunt, there's a lot of guys on bye this week that are good running backs. Josh Jacobs, Damian Pierce, Derrick Henry. So he's a guy that's going to just slide into that number 2 flex option at running back. And this week here versus New England, I could see him only get maybe 8 or 9 points as his floor. But his ceiling could also be 15-plus fantasy points. But this week I got him at 22, 23, J.K. Dobbins of the Baltimore Ravens. So this run game, obviously it starts with Lamar Jackson, but it would be nice if you get a little more from J.K. Dobbins or Kenyon Drake, or if Gus Edwards when he comes back. So far in 3 ball games this season, only 1 big game and 2 dud games here for Dobbins. Week 4, the big ball game out of all teams. He ran well versus Buffalo, 13 carries, 41 yards, a touchdown rushing, 4 catches, 22 yards and a touch. But now, this week here, not a great matchup for the Giants. Give up the 10th least amount of fantasy points to running backs on the season. But right here, Dobbins as a number 2 running back I think he could be decent this week here. And I got him at 23-24, James Robinson. And Jaguars. So Robinson got off to the hot start to begin the year, but now he's really slowed down, and he's a guy you have as a sit borderline type of guy. But right now with the bye weeks and stuff, you might have no choice but to play Robinson. And this weekend in Week 60 versus Indianapolis in Indy. So Week 2 in that ball game versus him, he had a good ball game, 64 rushing yards, a touchdown, and 2 catches for 14 yards for 15.8 fantasy points in Week 2 in PPR League. So this week here, James Robinson, I don't know if he'll have a great game this week, but right now, most fantasy owners don't have a choice. So I got him at 24-25, Rahim Mostert on the Miami Dolphins. So Mostert, I like the way he's been running, but he's a guy obviously throughout his career with a lot of injury concerns. But last week, the best game to date for him this season as a Miami Dolphin. 18 carries, 113 rush yards, and a touchdown. This week, he had a decent matchup on paper, but the problem is the Vikings could get off to a hot start in this game where they got to abandon the run, because last week, Dolphins kept it close the first 2.5 quarters, and then after that, the Jets blew the doors off them, and that was it. But Chase Edmonds, I thought would be a factor in this backfield, but last week, only 1 target, and I believe only 1 carry in that ball game, so he's not an option right now in the backfield. And Rahim Mostert, as long as he's healthy, he could be the lead dog over there in Miami, and he's shown it this season. Number 26, Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Etienne had one of his better games of his short career so far in the NFL. And the Jaguars, they want him to be the man over there, but he hasn't been putting up the numbers this season to be the man. But last week, 10 carries, 71 yards, 3 catches, 43 yards. So him and Robinson was almost a 50-50 split. This week here versus Indianapolis, I think he can make a few plays. And in my start-sit video, I had him as a borderline play this week here with Travis at Etienne. So right now this week, as a number 2 running back or a flex option, I think you could get worse than Etienne. And this week, I think he'll catch a few balls out of the backfield. It was good to see him get 10 carries to try to get things going, since that backfield had nothing going last week at Houston. And we'll see, but right now I'm going to be cautious with him and rank him at 26. Number 27, A.J. Dillon of the Green Bay Packers. So A.J. Dillon, I figured we'd see more out of him this season after he got off to a hot start in Week 1 where he had 20 fantasy points in Week 1. But ever since then, he just hasn't done anything. He's failed to reach double digits since Week 1. And right here, decent matchup versus the Jets this week, but I think it's going to be the Aaron Jones show. But like I said, with all the bye weeks and running backs injured over the last few weeks here, A.J. Dillon's a low-end 2 flex option, and I got him at 27-28, Brian Robinson Jr. of the Washington Commanders. So I don't know who's going to be the man over there in this backfield, but right now I'm assuming it's going to be Brian Robinson, and he had a decent ball game in his return, but it was more workload than anything. 9 carries in that one. Not a great game with only 22 rush yards, but this week here on Thursday Night Football at Chicago, they give up the 9th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. So right here, if Robinson's the lead dog, I think he got a decent ball game. I'm not going to be confident about starting him, but this week I got him at 28-29, Tony Pollard of the Dallas Cowboys. So Tony Pollard, if he don't break off a big run, to be honest, he don't do much for fantasy owners. But this season, more times than not, he's broken off the big run and put up some fantasy games. Last week with the 50-plus yard touchdown. A couple weeks ago at the Giants, he ran over 105 yards in that game. And Week 2 versus Cincinnati, he had a big running touchdown. So right here, Pollard's a good back, but he's a guy hard to trust each and every week as a number 2 running back. Maybe as his desperation flex on most weeks. But right here, I got him at 29. Number 30, Eno Benjamin of the Arizona Cardinals. So Benjamin, I explained this already early in the video, but he's going to be the starter with Connor out. He's going to have a huge ball game and be up there in the top 15 to top 18, in my opinion, is Eno Benjamin. So this week here, it's a great matchup with the Seattle Seahawks if he's the starter. So if he's the starter, top 15 running back. If not, I'll have him over here at 30 because I still think he'll get some workload. Connor's not going to be 100% even if he does play in this game. And the real backup running back, Darrell Williams, he's banged up as well with a knee injury, leaving in that Week 5 ball game. So it might be the last man standing is Eno Benjamin. And he's a guy this week I got at 30, but if he starts, like I said, he bumps up because he can catch the ball out of the backfield. And he could even get physical in between the tackles. Number 31, Tyler Algier of the Atlanta Falcons. So Tyler Algier, he was a hot pickup a few weeks ago here, but last week he came in a tough matchup versus Tampa Bay. He didn't do much of anything. 13 carries, 45 yards, and him and Huntley almost split pretty much. Huntley had 10 touches in that game. So right now, another tough matchup versus a great defense in the San Francisco 49ers that give up the third least amount of fantasy points to running backs on the season. So it's going to be tough sledding once again here for Algier. I had him as a sit candidate on my week 6 running back start to sit. And this week here, not many great running backs at the back end, but I got him at 31, 32, Darrell Henderson of the Los Angeles Rams. So right here, Darrell Henderson and Akers, they've pretty much been non-factors over the last few weeks here. But obviously, I think Henderson's the better running back so far this season. The last week, at least he put together a decent game, but he didn't get one touch or carry in that game. 4 catches, 30 yards on 5 targets. But this week here, they're going to control this ball game. I believe the Rams. They're going to start running the football a little more. They got a little too pass happy, even though I know they were trailing the whole second half pretty much versus the Dallas Cowboys in week 5. But right here versus the Panthers, I think he'll get some good play in this one is Henderson. And if he could get 10, 15 touches, maybe he could carve out a decent game. But this week here, I got him at 32, 33, Mike Boone of the Denver Broncos. So Mike Boone, like I said early in the video, he looked pretty good and impressive. He has some speed as Boone. He could catch the ball out of the backfield a little. And he had a decent ball game versus the Indianapolis Colts in PPR leagues in week 5. 7 carries, 38 yards, 3 catches, 47 yards. So this week here, great matchup at the Chargers. We give up the most fantasy points to running backs on the season. But right now, at most, I'm going to trust Boone as a flex option here with all the buys. And I got him in number 33, 34, Rashad White of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So White over the last 2 weeks here, we've been seeing him get more of a workload and even get some drives by himself with Fournette taking a blow. Because early in the season, Fournette was getting over 95% of the snaps or something at running back, which is just obviously an astronomical number and a number that's not going to be good for a veteran running back like Fournette as the season goes on. So right here, Rashad White coming in the last couple games for a series of 2, relieving Fournette to keep Fournette fresh. And this kid's got talent. A lot of people were big on him coming into the season. And right now he's starting to flash. So this week here with a decent matchup at Pittsburgh, I have him as a borderline flex option or real low-end number 2 running back at 34. Number 35, Michael Carter of the New York Jets. So last week, Michael Carter still had a good fantasy day with 17.3 fantasy points, 21 rush yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 catches for 12 yards. So right here this week, tough matchup than last week here at the Packers that give up the 12th least amount of fantasy points to running backs on the season. But right here, Michael Carter's a guy I'm not really going to have confidence in starting. Breece Hall looks like he's a guy that can handle 25, 30 touches a game right now for this Jet team. So Carter was good last season for fantasy owners. This year, he's going to be an up-and-down type of player with the Breece Hall volume and just the playmaking ability of Breece Hall right now. So this week, I got him at 35 and 36th. And final running back I'm ranking this week's DJ Dallas of the Seattle Seahawks. And we know Kenneth Walker is going to be the guy over there. But last season, DJ Dallas filling in for a couple games where Penny was out was actually a serviceable option as a flex or number 2 running back in deeper leagues, where he showed prowess of catching the ball out of the backfield, finding some short yardage goal line touches. And this week here, to take a flyer on him and see what he could do on the bench wouldn't hurt. And Kenneth Walker, I don't think he's going to go out there and right off the bat carry 25, 30 times a game. I think we'll see Dallas mixed in a little and some Travis Homer. But this week here, I got a feeling Dallas gets decent playing time, and I got him at 36. That's the top 36 running backs I'm ranking here for week 6 of the fantasy football season.